Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. I'd like us all to stand for a moment of personal reflection, please. Thank you. Merci. So it's Christmas time. We have invited the chorale of the Centre Charles-Émile Claude to help us sing the national anthem. Normally, Councillor Gardner is feeling lonely when he sings it, but now we're all going to sing it together with the help of La Chorale.
If you don't mind, Madam Mayor, I'd like them to start in their key.
Absolutely. Alors, La Chorale.
What's their key? It opens the door.
Merci beaucoup à la chorale du Centre Charles-Émile Claude, and you came last minute too, so it was we were great to come in and accept to do this and put us in the Christmas spirit. Merci beaucoup. Joyeux Noël à vous. We acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Bernadette Clément,
Présente.
Councillors Claude McIntosh,
Présent.
Elaine McDonald,
Present.
Sid Gardner,
Here.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Present.
Caroline Hébert,
Présent.
Councillors Modeste Pell,
Present.
Glenn Grant,
Present.
Todd Bennett,
Present.
Justin Towndale,
Present.
and Éric Bergeron.
Présent.
See, any additions, deletions, or amendments? Oh, Councillor McDonald? No? Okay.
I have one, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
And that is the addition of bylaw 2019-165, purchase of land at 735 Tollgate Road, rendering or confirming bylaw number 2019-166.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. Councillor Grant, as amended. Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Dupel. All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of interest? Councillor Hébert.
I have one, Madam Mayor. I will disclose interest for the presentation, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. It is a joint project with Vibrant Communities, which is a Social Development Council initiative. I'm employed by the Social Development Council.
Duly noted, Madam Clerk.
I have my phone.
Thank you. Need a motion to go into Committee of the Whole. Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Gardner. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes. So there are a few meetings. Special meeting of council for Monday, November 25th, a regular meeting, and then the special meeting of December 2nd, which was the water and sewer budget. So we can make one motion for all three sets of minutes. Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Towndale. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Presentations, Madam Clerk.
We have a presentation this evening, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and presenting is Carmen Cousineau and Inspector Dave Michaud. And I will be reading out the recommendation after the meeting, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So there's a slideshow coming up. Okay. Do you want to introduce?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. My name is David Michaud. I'm an inspector with the Cornwall Police Service in charge of support services and strategic initiatives.
Hi, I'm Carmen Cousineau. I'm the project coordinator for the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan that we're presenting this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Hebert, who has been instrumental throughout this process, and without her efforts, this would have been a little more difficult. So thank you to Councillor Hebert.
Thank you for starting with that. That's nice. Thank you.
So this is our plan for the Vibrant Communities, our Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Next slide, please. So new legislation requirements for the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan came into effect in January 1st of 2019. All municipalities had 2 years from that date to prepare and adopt a plan, which brings us to December 31st, 2020. We're a little bit ahead of the curve. In February 2019, Council accepted our proposal to establish the prescribed multi-sectoral Project Advisory Committee to undertake the planning and framework. And with that, I would like to thank Councillor Gardner for agreeing to sit as chair of that steering committee. Thank you, sir. That time it was decided at the first advisory committee meeting that most effective way of planning to work would be to collaboratively work as a region, including the City of Cornwall, SDNG, and the Mohawk Territory of Akwesasne. The framework for this project included identifying local priorities based on the community consultation, the multiple sources of data, also to identify evidence-based programs and strategies to address the priorities and risk factors, identifying measurable outcomes with associated performance measures. And I'd like to turn it over to my partner Carmen to continue with the presentation.
So just to walk you through the process we took to develop the plan, the version 1 of the plan is public engagement. It started actually with the Vibrant Communities Initiative through the Social Development Council. And back in 2018, where about 701 people participated in a survey to talk about what are the biggest challenges or risks in the community that can be addressed. And in that 701, we've seen people from business, from government, from nonprofit agencies, those with lived experience, those that are struggling perhaps in poverty, the nonprofit sector. And we had a good representation from Akwesasne, SDNG, and Cornwall being the largest population that responded. So those folks at that time identified 10 priority areas. Mental health, number 1 in every circumstances and everything that came up. 1 in 5 people struggle from mental health issues. It is our biggest challenge moving forward. Access to health services, that includes doctors and hospitals and more outreaching type services. Poverty. At the time, those were the top 3 focus areas that the social development were going to focus on. But then along came the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan in 2019. So we actually somewhat merged. So community safety, even though it was, I think, 8th or 9th on the list, actually became the 4th pillar that we would focus our attentions on. So then once we identified the top 10 and that we were going to start with the top 4 risk factors, what are we going to do with them? What are the issues regarding mental health, healthcare services? So there was a subsequent set of events or public engagements. And we had a target of 700, and that was based on the population and dividing Akwesasne, SDG, Cornwall. And if you look at the actual number, we're just shy of well, 1128 people. So we far surpassed the amount of people we like to talk to. And those folks helped us develop under the 4 pillars, 10 themes under each one. So it's nice to say, 1,200 people gave us their thoughts and opinions on what's, our challenges in the community, but we needed supporting data as well. So there was a research component to the plan to talk about what are the statistics regarding mental health, what's the wait times in hospitals, how many, doctors, and of course, community resources. So Cornwall City website hosts the Social Development Council's list of community resources. There's about 300 resources on the website, and we've encouraged the counties and Akwesasne to link to it as well and keep that list up to date. So anyone in the community can say, okay, I have an addiction issue. Who could I speak to? So that list is currently on your website and available throughout the region. And in addition to that, there are what we call action tables. So we have 300 individual organizations, but those organizations in those sectors often have a committee or a work group or situation table, and they meet together to discuss issues that are common to their work. So the plan also identifies 2 to 3 action tables. I call them community assets, that if we had another issue come up, that we can go to those action groups or committee to ask them to work on it. So those are our 4 pillars: mental health, health services, poverty, and community safety. So as I mentioned earlier, those 4 areas each have 9, 10 themes, and then under each theme there's 4 to 5 action items. What can we do to address them? So we're talking about 160 strategies that people have come forward saying, if you did this, this would help. If you did this. So now we're at the point where you have a copy electronically, I believe, of the plan. It's not even our intent to print it, because as the weeks go by, it changes. Actually, as of this morning, there was some new changes that came about. So we would like to have it as an electronic copy, because we don't want a printed plan that we know might go on the shelf or in the drawer. We want it to be a vibrant plan that will continue to change and evolve. We're 1 year ahead of the schedule. You only have to report back to the province December 2020. So what we're proposing in the next year is to take this version 1 and work on a version 2. Look at those strategies. Do they make sense? Are they the best practice? What kind of financial resources do we need to make them happen? Some of them are quick and easy. Some of them are long-term. Some of them are public information session. So we would like to take the next year to refine it and provide a version 2. And the Social Development Council that covers Cornwall, Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, and Akwesasne have agreed to take the lead in forming a working group under each of the 4 pillars, asking subject matter experts, police or hospitals or doctors, to participate and then reaffirm those outcomes and look at them and even the supporting data and come back next year with the version 2. And the reason we're here tonight is that we have an opportunity. Cornwall Police has an opportunity to apply for funding for a 3-year grant to implement some of the strategies in this plan. But in order to do so, we can't say, well, we're hoping that the city will adopt the plan and therefore we would like some funds to move forward. So we would like to ask you this evening, if possible, to adopt version 1 of the plan with the understanding that over the next year we will continue to work, have those focus groups in place, and provide you a version 2 around this time next year. So the resolution would be to have Cornwall, the City of Cornwall, adopt the SDG Cornwall Akwesasne, the acronym being SDGCA. It was just the easiest one to say. Vibrant Communities, Our Safety and Wellbeing Plan version 1, dated December 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As chair of that committee and having 20 different groups around that table was interesting to a point. Even at my age, I was learning every day, and I thank Carmen for asking me to sit on that committee. There's a couple of things I'd like to say, and that's Carmen, who really doesn't like to be sign her name to documents and stuff like that. Has been, the leadership that you showed was amazing. And I can't leave Carolyn Hebert out of this because both of you worked your butts off to get this thing done. To have it done a year before and having a living document, and that's what was important to me, and I think the whole group, was a living document means that as things change in our communities, we will adapt to those changes. That makes it interesting because, as you said, it's not going to sit on the shelf. It's going to continue to get better. So thank you for your work. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the whole group that was there appreciated what you did. And to look at the variety of the folks that were sitting around that table from almost every walk of life brought information that was so important to the communities that are involved. So I just want to thank you. And to adopt.
And move the
And
motion.
you move the motion? Is there a
I'm
seconder?
just so taken by these people that,
Councillor Elaine McDonald seconds. Further comments or questions? I just have a couple. Is that okay? The 3-year grants, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that, because that's, my ears perked up when I heard that. And I think the fact that we're 1 year ahead of schedule means that we have an advantage here, I think, in terms of the grant. What is this grant going to do, or what is it about? Can you
So
give
with-
us more detail?
With the Proceeds of Crime grant that came out this year, there's an area that will allow us to partner with partnering law enforcement agencies to leverage additional funds for something like the implementation of our community safety plans. So we've already been in contact with the OPP and with the Akwesasne Police, and both have agreed to work together with the Cornwall Police.
So it's,
to-
again, going to be a joint application?
Correct.
Ah,
Correct,
okay.
and that was one of the requirements. It had to be a multi-jurisdictional application with multi-sectors as well. As Councillor Gardner indicated, we have the hospital that is interested. We have social assistance that's interested in partnering with us. So we have a lot of those partners that sit at that steering committee that have all continued to team up to leverage this grant.
And how much is that?
It's a possibility of up to 600,000,
Okay,
200,000 per year.
sounds
So
good.
normally, each police service is allowed 100,000 per year. But if they do partner with other police services, you could access up to 200,000. So my intent is, the deadline is next Monday, is to apply for the full 200,000 for the next 3
For the next 3 years. Great. The other question I had is around the number of strategies. There's so many, so many ideas came forward. Have you done the work to sort of prioritize that into something that is a bit more manageable? Do you know what I mean? Like when you look at it, it's absolutely massive and impressive, but then it feels like it's a lot. So have you done that prioritizing work?
It is our intent that the working groups that will probably start meeting in January, their role is to look at their section and say, does it make sense? What are the resources? What would be the financial implications? Is this a best practice? The actual number of recommendations was closer to 700. So bringing
Okay.
it down, they've already been grouped and prioritized. So the chart that's in the plan is actually in order of priority
Okay.
well. So it will be their role over the next year to roll up the sleeves and say, do these make sense? To redefine them and look at them. And that will be probably in your version 2, more closely aligned to what we anticipate happening in the next following 2 years.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you both. I agree with Councillor Gardner. Ms. Cousineau, you're humble, very humble. But thank you for your leadership on this. I have to say that every time I went online, every time I went to a country fair, every time I went to a gathering, there was the survey, there was Councillor Hébert, there was some member of the board of the SDC or a member of the committee asking for input, getting input, engaging with people. Like 100% A+ marks for engagement. We should all be taking a page out of the SDG and committee book on how to engage with people. Very impressed.
I think it's critical that we went to where they are.
Yes.
It was to the powwow, it
Yes.
was to the Williamstown Fair, it was to the bingo, it was to, so
Everywhere.
where people are, so that they could vote and give their input. It would be impossible to get 1,200 people to respond to surveys or questions any other way than but to go to them.
Yeah, and it felt really natural and really organic, so,
Had lots of volunteers, some students, the health unit, Eastern Ontario Health Unit was also partnering with the Social Development Council. They had a meeting, and I know Carrie Lynn's probably sitting, a meeting July 10th, probably the most popular vacation time ever, anticipating maybe 40 people to attend, 100 people attended.
yeah.
So it is near and dear, and I think it's also important that we continue the momentum. There was an article that came out this week about the plan. We'd like to see it continue. When you ask 1,200 people their opinion, if they don't see something happening and some changes, you can lose it. So
Absolutely.
that's why I think the timing is good, and if we are successful in the grant.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning the media. I find that the Seaway News and the Standard Fielder were very, very adept and thorough in their coverage on that. And they don't often compliment the media, so I'm going to do this now. Thank you for that. I think Councillor Grant wanted to ask a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering about our MPP. Have you lobbied him about the grant proposal?
Not at this point. It is something that we briefly mentioned and would like to see happen as well.
If you need help with that, let me know.
Definitely.
Any further questions? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to, commend you on this report. It's just wonderful, the breadth and the scope of everything you've proposed here. A lot of this is going to be very expensive, obviously, and a lot of it is beyond the control of a municipality. So obviously, we're kind of piggybacks on Councillor Grant's question. Have you considered a lobbying exercise with our MPP, because, or just a report to him even, that he knows where the pressure points are from us to them? Is that on the
Radar. Initially, we wanted to meet with the 3 councils, so we met with Mohawk Council this morning, here this evening, and then counties next week. Then we can take it further. We wanted to have your approval before we go further
Right.
with any lobbying with the provincial government. The grant will help us get going. We have lots of strategies we want to support, but we're doing our council first.
doing the groundwork?
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
If I may, just one little point. Initially, this was to be a Cornwall report, and Carmen and Madame Ibaya all decided that why do we want to duplicate work? Why don't we bring Aquasasni and SDG into the fold so that you don't have to do it again and cost more money? So that was, again, you, Carmen, that brought that forward, so thanks for that, too. I'm sure the counties will appreciate it.
Yes, not only that, many of the organizations cover the same areas. So if we each had our leadership table, we'd have 3 committees, 3 groups. We want our plans to be cohesive, and even the welcoming message. It's the first one I've ever seen where you have the 3 municipalities saying, we did this together, we're in it together, we're part of it. And so when we apply for the grant next week, we're showing 3 police services working together, and we're hoping 3 municipalities. And that will be going to the provincial government, so I think it bodes well.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. When I read the 44 pages, I was talking to Inspector Michaud about how long that actually took. One thing I thought that gave me a little bit of hope about this particular report is I see a lot, we've all seen a lot, of identifying what is wrong with the community or what is wrong with an area. what I liked is that there are actually some initiatives to tackle what is wrong with the area. And when I look at the mental health, it's amazing to me what that causes down the road. So, you know, addiction, poverty. A lot of these people are generational, and they don't know that their kid needs help because they needed the help. And so I think if there's anything this plan is going to do, is it's going to start breaking some cycles. And that is something that I've heard talked about for a long, long time. This is the first time I've ever seen a plan that looks like it's actually going to be able to do something about that. So kudos for recognizing that, for getting that going, I should say, not necessarily recognizing, but be able to tackle the roots and maybe, you know, getting this generation of young people not so afraid to ask for help so that their kids have a chance. So thanks for that.
You'll notice that the bubbles are overlapped.
Yes.
Because if you help one area, you're helping another, in all 4 pillars. If the community's safer and people feel more comfortable, and they have the services they need, we're already seeing that more and more people that have mental health issues are coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
That means that there's a strain on our services, and the wait list now is longer. So our success is also our challenge, so very much so.
Agreed.
Bringing down that stigma about reporting mental health issues and acknowledging that I need help.
Well, thank you once again for all of your work. Thank you. I see stakeholders in the audience and board members of the SDC are present. So thank you for being here. And we look forward to what's next. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Voting on the, yes. Are we adopting this? All in favor? Carried. Unanimous. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Moving on to consent items. First one is Army, Navy, and Air Force veteran tax exemption request, with a recommendation to refer this request for municipal tax exemption to administration for a report. Our second item is a proclamation recommended that council proclaim the week of December 15th to the 21st, 2019, as Children's Christmas Fun Week in the city of Cornwall, and allow its flag to be flown at 340 Pitt Street for the duration of that period. Our third item is another proclamation requesting that council proclaim January 2020 as Alzheimer Awareness Month in the city of Cornwall.
Moved by Councillor Dupel and seconded by Councillor Grant. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor? Carried. Next item.
We have a resolution. The mover is Councillors Sid Gardner and Elaine McDonald. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Cornwall lobby the provincial government to amend the Safe Drinking Water Act to indemnify municipal council members where drinking water sources are contaminated due to a provincial decision such as an aggregate exaction permit. Now therefore be it further resolved that this resolution be forwarded to SDNG MPP and MP for their support. Now therefore be it further resolved that this resolution be forwarded to AMO, requesting that it send it all to all municipalities in Ontario for their support.
Councillor Gardner, did you want to speak to that?
Just very briefly, it's easy to understand. The fact of the matter is I was talking to some people at AMO, specifically Monica Turner, who is one of the administrators of AMO. And during that discussion, we went to Section 16 of Bill 132. The Clean Water Act puts us at a liability in terms of if any water is contaminated based on going below the water table. We are responsible for that. We can be sued. We can go to jail because it's our responsibility. So what I'm asking AMO is to go to the 444 different municipalities in Ontario and get their support so that we are indemnified and not have the responsibility for a decision that they made. So.
Any further comment concerning this motion? Councillor Towndale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I need some more information on this before I'd be prepared to support this fully. I think I understand the premise behind it, but you know, when we got our training from the Walkerton Clean Water section, center, we were told that we are responsible for the water table. We are responsible. Now, my understanding here, if I'm getting this correct, is that if a provincial decision affects our water supply, then we're still liable. And I think that's what this is trying to address. But we are liable for our own water supply, and quite frankly, we should be because of what happened in Walkerton all those years ago. So I'd like to maybe hear some more information from administration or defer this for a report back that would explain this in greater detail.
So I'm going to turn to the CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we certainly could bring a report back. I believe that Councillor Gardner's resolution, part of the decision of the province is that they will now have authority to provide permissions or permitting that would have impacts to water below the water table level, and that the city is also responsible, council has a responsibility for that potential contamination of water as well. So I think that the underlying premise is, how can our municipal council be responsible for something when the province is going to grant a permit or allow access for that type of activity to occur? I would imagine what's going to happen as well as the province is probably going to be reviewing this. This is not, it's not been passed yet. I think it's out for feedback, but that's the underlying premise of the resolution. But if council would like a report to be brought back, we could certainly bring a report back.
Just if I can.
Councillor Gardner.
Part of this resolution is the province, by allowing aggregate below the water table, is against the Clean Water Act. It's contrary to the Clean Water Act. That's why I brought it here. If you read the rest of the report, you'll understand that
So,
it's got to be done because we were responsible for anything that happens to our water. And we don't have any say in how it's going to be done. So this gives us responsibility, but it gives us a say. And if the province continues the way they're going, then they will be responsible. That's what I'm looking for us to be indemnified so that we don't have the responsibility of what the province decided to do. And I'm sure there'll be some changes once this happens. And it also comes from the AMO, I talked to AMO about this, and they're the ones that, and it was at an Alpha conference, but I happened to be talking about Bill 132. And their AMO are the ones that said, you gotta do this, because you guys are responsible for what the province is gonna be doing. So, move it forward.
so a motion to defer is also in order. If Councillor Towndale wanted to proceed with that, that's fine. I'm ready to entertain that. Or any further debate or questions concerning this motion. Councillor Towndale.
I'm going to put forward a motion to defer to get a report back from administration that contains more information on kind of the history of what's happening here and what we're actually like supporting.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bergeron. So on the deferral, discussion? No questions? All in favor of the deferral? Against? Did you count that? Oh.
Wait.
All in favor of the deferral? And against? It carries. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor of deferral.
So
one is it?
what carried, the deferral or the?
Madam Clerk?
So the motion is to defer, and it was voted, the opposition one.
Okay,
Defeated.
So it's
now we
defeated,
vote
so
on
the
the motion.
main motion is back on the floor.
thank you.
So we vote on the motion now?
All in favor of the motion, yes. Against? Carried. Merci. Next item.
Request to designate the waterfront trail as a smoke-free zone. The recommendation is that council receive this report and provide administration with direction on the following additional specified items for inclusion or omission in a bylaw to regulate the smoking and vaping. And they're outlined in ABC. A is designate the entire length of the waterfront trail and all areas within 20 meters of the trail within the city's limit as smoke-free. B, designate all of Lamoureux Park and Legion Park as smoke-free with an exemption for RCAF wing patio. And C, designate all city parks as smoke-free.
So there are 3 items. I don't know if council wants to split those up or how you want to proceed. Councillor Mack was the first one to put up his hand, and then Councillor Grant.
I'd
Councillor McIntosh?
go with C, designate all city parks smoke-free. The 20-meter thing could be a dandy to try to enforce. Sticking with just Lamoureux Park and, what was the other one? Gainesville Park? Legion Park. Why not just make them all smoke-free? Go from there. It's,
So your motion
less
would,
confusion. So my motion would be to designate all city parks smoke-free.
and so in that motion, would
And
that,
with the exemption of
the patio?
the patio.
So would that encompass all the rest then, Madam CEO, if that were,
Yes.
right, would that encompass
See,
Lamoureux
the
Park
trail
and
parks-
Guindon?
parks, it would
Would
be included.
encompass the waterfront trail and Lamoureux Park, Legion Park, all except for the RCAF wing patio
That's the.
and our city
yeah.
parks.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Oh,
Excuse me,
sorry, Madam Clerk, go ahead.
If I clarify, you are moving for A, B, and C to be designated smoke-free.
If we,
Is that
my
correct?
understanding is if it's C, that includes the A
That-
and B.
He's just going with number 3.
That would include the trail and all the parks.
Okay.
Rather,
Yes.
because A, separate,
Okay, we need clarity on the motion. I'm seeing people around the table
motion
not
is-
clear, so can I ask Mr. Boileau to speak to that?
I believe the answer is that it is. To be very clear though, there could be portions of the bike path that would be questionable, and for example, we would say, from, say the college to Grace Creek. So that portion, I suppose someone could wonder as to whether they're on a city park or not. I would suggest that we could say C, but together with the other, and make it clear as well that there is an exemption for the RCAF wing.
so if the motion was rejigged to say smoking ban on the trail and all city parks, with the exception of the patio at RCA,
The wing.
the wing.
Madam Clerk?
The ban covers the trail plus all city parks with, and the wings patio would be included because it's a city park. Fair, does it make sense? Makes sense to you, well, for everybody?
Okay, so there needs to be a seconder for that motion. Councillor Gardner seconds the motion. Debate. Councillor Hébert and then Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. Would that include the marina?
Mr. Boileau.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I was not in attendance for the meeting with the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, but I believe that conversation did occur, and that it was viewed as being it's not viewed as being a community recreational facility,
Okay.
and so that's not the case. So generally, if a property has a community recreational facility on it, it is fully, and so that is almost all of Lamoureux Park already. And then there are some, the splash pads, et cetera, are facilities, or recreational, structures, I guess. And there is also a 20-meter setback from that, so, but I believe the marina is a separate situation.
Okay.
And it's of course federally owned, so that's
Right.
a bit of a difference.
Tricky. Okay. Thank you.
I have Councillor Bergeron and Hollingsworth. Who else? Go ahead, Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you. Can I just get some clarity that the 20 meters is included in this motion? You're basically making the motion that these 3 items be approved? From the clerk, I suppose?
To Mark.
No, to the clerk.
I could-
I want to make sure the
Madam Mayor,
clerk. yeah.
I believe that that's what the intent of the motion was. Mr. Boileau indicated that the third one would encompass all areas. So
Specifically, the 20 meters is what I'm asking about.
I would refer that to Mr. Boileau then.
Thank you. Mr. Boileau?
So the smoke-free regulation says that you can't smoke on on the grounds that has a community recreation facility. So for example, that includes the complex, et cetera. So it's that boundary. So the law, without us passing a bylaw, says you can't smoke 20 meters from those grounds. If the council passes a bylaw that says in addition you can't smoke in a park, it doesn't need a 20-meter boundary. 20-meter boundary doesn't apply to the park unless you put it in place.
Okay, thank you. So 20 meters from the waterfront trail, and what I'm reading here is all areas within 20 meters. How do we distinguish businesses, homeowners, people that live within 20 meters of that waterfront trail?
We cannot apply laws to private property. So these are all public property.
Right, but it says all areas. So it just it implies all areas we have control over.
So it's 20 meters on public property.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it's a difference. And then I suppose my question is, who enforces this? And I'm not sure who to ask that question to.
Madam CEO?
Mr. Boileau?
It would typically be everyone, including all enforcement officers, so the police, our own enforcement officers.
So when we look at the cost of this, I see the cost of signage, I don't see the cost of enforcement. Have we factored in the total cost of enforcement versus fines and all of this, or will we just be guessing?
Well, we do have experience. This is extended, but it's not new. We do, of course, have laws that say you can't smoke within a certain distance from a building already. And so this is really just an extension of that. I don't expect it to be more cumbersome on the enforcement staff.
Okay, thank you. Last question. If we were already enforcing 9 meters, I think is the rule, are we receiving revenue from that? Are there fines being issued? Do you know offhand if people are disrespecting that bylaw, or it's just out there?
I have to be honest with you, I'm not aware of any infractions. But certainly there would normally be fines. I do see in the City of Brockville bylaw, for example, and of course we have no bylaw to provide you yet. We would do that. But the City of Brockville example has violations of, I think, $250 for smoking within so.
Okay.
You know, there's an example that we would probably bring forward.
So, I mean, on the basis of the motion, are we opposed to it? I think there's some rewording that we can do. I think there's some enforcement that we can do, and I think the 20-meter item is more what we should be talking about instead of all city parks. So I'll vote against this motion, but I have some ideas on how we can change that. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, Your Worship. Forgive me, I'm sort of blind when I put my glasses on to see and then take them off to see, so I'm not going to support this motion, Your Worship, under any circumstances. I'm just not on board. We have a litter bylaw that was passed in 1996 that basically says if I'm smoking a cigarette and I throw it on the ground, I've littered and therefore there's a fine. Very few people know about it because we've never really been able to enforce it. Technically speaking, under that bylaw, we're basically making another bylaw that we already have a bylaw for. So we're going to have a bylaw to support a bylaw that we already have that says don't litter, but we don't enforce that. So if we can't enforce that one, we figure we're going to enforce this one. That's the first thing. The second thing, Your Worship, is that we pitch and say, well, we should stop people from smoking on the bike path, or because they're throwing their butts in the river and that's bad for fish, which and they show us a picture of fish eating butts, and fair enough, but the truth of the matter is, Your Worship, if we were talking about and being environmentally friendly, and if we're all about managing the river and making sure it's safe for everybody, then we should pass a bylaw that says you shouldn't be allowed to drink bottled water beside the river, because quite frankly, plastic bottles are far more dangerous and subversive to the environment than cigarette butts, or at least comparable to. And having done a little boating in my time, I can assure you there's plenty of plastic water bottles floating down the river. So if we're really about trying to protect the environment, then this bylaw doesn't even get close to where we're supposed to be. On top of that, and maybe I can ask this question before I make this comment, I'm not sure who I'm directing it to. If our storm sewers go directly to the river, correct, for the most part?
3, Madam Mayor, that's correct.
So, thank you. So that being said, Your Worship, if we're trying to keep butts from going in the river, then we should say that you can't smoke pretty much anywhere, because if someone throws a cigarette butt in the street, it's going to get washed into the storm sewer, which means it's going to end up in the river. And so in essence, we haven't really stopped anything, because that's where they're going to go anyway. The point is, Your Worship, I guess where I'm getting is that we've decided to make the smokers the pariah of all things evil, and currently in Canada, smoking is not against the law. And if we're worried about air quality, well, fair enough. But the bottom line is we can't enforce the bylaw. We're not going to be able to do it. We already have a bylaw that says you can't throw butts on the ground, and we can't enforce that one. And if we're trying to protect the river or the environment, there's a lot of other things that people do that is hazardous to the river and the environment that we don't have a bylaw for, and nobody seems to be really prepared to talk about those per se. So that being said, Your Worship, I cannot support this. I think it's I guess here's what I'll finish with. When we can support or substantiate or enforce the litter bylaw, then come and let me know, and then we'll talk about something else, because we can't even enforce that one. Thank you.
Councillor Grant and then Councillor Dupel.
Hard act to follow.
Passionate.
Just a clarification for, I don't understand why there's a change in, because everything that's in this 1, 2, 3, I think is in the bylaw or the recommendation, right? Just so for clarification purposes.
Do we have the motion clear?
The motion is to go with A and C, understanding that it covers all of the parks.
Or 1 and 2.
In the report, they're numbered.
A, B, and C?
No.
Oh, on the agenda itself, 1 and 3.
Now, why are we, I understand that you're adding on number 3, then you're adding the RCAF wing?
Mr. Boileau.
If I don't want to suggest, so the way I understood the motion is that they would want to amend 3, which to be designate all city parks and trails as smoke-free, with an exception for the RCAF patio.
Can we take note of that and then reread that, please?
To designate all city parks and trails as smoke-free, with the exception of the RCAF wing patio.
That's basically 1, 2, and 3.
Yep. Well, there's no need for 2.
It is
Oh,
2.
okay. Just, I need clarification what I'm voting on, that's all.
So we have the wording. You want to reread that, Madam Clerk?
So it's basically, if you encompass it all, it's basically 1, 2, and 3.
That's how I understand it,
Okay.
yes.
Getting back to the last speaker's comments, through you, Madam Chair, smoking and littering, etc., is a mindset. And if you don't talk about it, people will not start thinking about it. So this is going to get people talking. And I've seen that, and I agree with most of what Councillor Hollingsworth said. I saw it in one coffee establishment where the people would go outside and they marked off 9 meters with a piece of chalk, and they smoked 1 foot away from that. So people that smoke are going to smoke wherever they can. If you put enough deterrent, like $250 in Brockville, man, I think people will start thinking about it, and they start talking. And I think this is a good motion. It gets people thinking that smoking is not just, we're not going to tolerate littering, whether it be smoking or otherwise, and we can start near our river. And we can start talking about littering elsewhere as well. So I'm going to support this 100% because we've got to start getting that mindset changed.
Councillor DePel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have some clarification. So through you, as chair, I just want to know how we're going to enforce this rule when we're already, I would say, as a city department, we're already struggling trying to enforce the property standards issues, all of the other issues that faces bylaw. So I just want to know how we're going to enforce this bylaw to try and work with people who are smoking in open areas.
Mr. Boileau?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think really it's just another law that our current officers will have to enforce. It's an expanded law, it's not a new law. I also think that these types of issues will require some educational information from the city, and that can occur through our website and through various other media. So it's really an educational information for the public to become aware of it. Sometimes you'll see people smoking within proximity of the buildings and they shouldn't be, and I think really it's for all of the public to also play a role in that, and that's the way I see it. I mean, there are other laws like this, jaywalking. Very often people will jaywalk, and of course there are no consequences. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have laws that are like that. I think the laws should be in place. So.
And through you, Madam Mayor, is it possible that, obviously not tonight, but is it possible that council get a report on how many infractions are being handed out through bylaw, through the already, you have to be so far away from the public building, or you have to not smoke on any property off a city-owned recreational facility? Is there somehow that we can get a report as to how it's being enforced and to what level?
Mr. Boileau?
My guess at that answer, quite honestly, is that if we were to approach, if an enforcement officer comes into proximity of a building and someone is smoking, they provide that information to that person. I'm not sure that there is, unless there was a reoccurrence, and I can get that information, but I'd be very surprised if we ever had any infractions. It's more of a, please pay attention to the law. It's posted, and usually people will comply. If they don't, I think then perhaps there are consequences.
Because I know, through you, Madam Mayor, I know that the health unit is very active with giving out infractions for people smoking too close to a building. So I didn't know how we did as a city, but I think that I feel like if we're going to put this added responsibility to the existing bylaw officers we have, I don't think, and I understand what Mr. Boileau is saying, and I appreciate that, but we hear from residents all the time that we just have bylaws to have bylaws, but we don't enforce bylaws. That's when people are calling you as a councillor to complain, that's what they're saying. They're saying, we have a bylaw, but it's never enforced. This is the problem I'm dealing with. So I just don't see how we're going to take away from the already tax department right now to try and enforce this in the outdoor space. So I won't support the motion this evening.
Councillor Towndale, and then Councillor McDonald.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Comments have already been asked, or questions have already been asked, sorry.
Councillor McDonald, and then Councillor Hébert.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this motion. I think that when we establish bylaws like this, we establish a community standard, and I think that's a good thing. And if we have scofflaws in our community who violate the standards, well, there's enough public pressure that people, just passersby, can bring to bear that over time will help educate people. And if they don't comply, we're not going to get 100% compliance maybe on anything. But the fact that we're not going to catch somebody who's breaking one of our standards is not a reason for us not to establish that standard, because we can help move public opinion. We can promote good ideas simply by establishing them in bylaws. And when we can, if there's an infraction, especially if it's a repeated one, then we can move on it. But for the most part, these are the kind of parks we want for our kids. This is the kind of waterfront path that we want to have everybody to enjoy. These are good things for us to associate with our community. And people get educated over the course of years, and eventually they'll comply. And if not, well, they'll be outsiders. It's not a reason for us not to establish these standards.
Councillor Hébert and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My comments are similar to Councillor McDonald's. First of all, this is beyond litter, and of course, I think I would probably be the first one here to encourage anything that would discourage littering, but it certainly goes beyond the littering. It's about healthier, safer environments for our youth, for our residents when using the recreational trail. And I understand this isn't going to be enforced 100%, it's impossible, but bylaws discourage folks from doing things. And so if they see a sign, hopefully more people will, walk the 20 meters or leave the park or wait till they get somewhere else to have their cigarette. There are speeding bylaws or infractions that that happen, and I'm sure not all of us follow those speed limits. I may be guilty, but I stay within the limits within reason, knowing that there could be a potential infraction. So I think that's the same case. We're not going to catch people doing this, but hopefully we'll discourage them from smoking in a place where kids might be, or folks might be cycling through. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
I pretty well know where I stand in terms of smoking past Chauvel. And I'll agree with Councillor McIntosh that if we should go ahead with this. We sit around this table and we talk about how environmentally friendly we are, but we're not going to pass a bylaw to allow people to flick cigarettes in the river, to do plastic bottles instead of picking them up when they're boarding. You see them pick them up. We need to put the message out there that this council talks about environment being environmentally friendly, but let's be environmentally friendly. Let's tell people, no, in this city we don't like you putting your garbage in the river. We don't want you to litter all over the place. And yeah, maybe we're short on bylaw officers, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, the message is coming from us. We're the leaders, so we need to lead. You need to walk the talk, not just sit there and find excuses for not passing bylaws.
Councillor Bennett.
Actually, thanks, my point was made already. Twice.
Okay. Councillor McIntosh.
The proposals here, Single Oak Lamoureux Park and Legion Park, and I imagine that's because the trail went through those. But I can sit at King George Park, watch a ball game, and light up a cigarette. 20 people, 50 people around. I can do it at Optimus Park right now. Is that correct? No, there's no smoking in those parks?
No, 9 meters.
Mr. Boileau.
You have to be 20 meters from ballpark.
Okay, but, fair enough, but, because there are children there, right?
Because it's a ballpark.
Yeah, because there are people that congregate in
Yeah.
those parks. Well, people congregate in a lot of the parks in the city. When it comes to enforcement, does the East Ontario Health Unit not enforce some of this?
Mr. Boileau.
That's my understanding. Really, when I looked at the City of Brockville bylaw on page 95, they talk about enforcement and who would do that. So it's really the enforcement officers and the police. But I would agree that I think the health unit probably does play a role, certainly did with the smoking in public places.
They're the ones that drive by schools, and if anybody's on school property smoking, they can, they have the
So I
right to
would-
ticket them.
I
So,
think notwithstanding the city of Brockville doesn't say that,
Yeah.
I think certainly that would be the
Yeah,
case.
it's not so much an enforcement. I think, like, I've never seen anybody smoke within the 9 meters of a building. Because, you know, the sign says you don't do it, and a lot of people respect the law. So they don't, you know, that, I doubt very much if they hand out a ticket. Enforcement, it's not, you can, it's like jaywalking, walking through a red light. The police aren't always gonna be there to ticket anybody, but I just don't see the enforcement as it's not an issue here because it's just, we're setting up a restriction on smoking in city parks, and over time, people are going to get used to it, and sure, people are gonna cheat on it and probably get away with it, but at least as my colleague here said, we're setting a community standard, and I have no problem with this, because we're gonna enforce it in Lambrou Park, why not all parks?
So I'm going to call the vote. I will be supporting the motion. I agree that enforcement is always a problem, but I also know that the leadership role is about setting community standards, and hopefully having people understand where we want to be as a community down the road. It's an evolution, a process, and it starts somewhere. All in favor? Against? Carried. Next item, Madam Clerk?
Rotary Circle decorative lighting. The action recommended is that council receive this report and direct administration to proceed with items 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 at an estimated cost of $14,520.
Councillor Bergeron put up his hand very quickly. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I made this motion at the last meeting, so I'd like to talk about it. I'd like to just start with a motion that we approve item 4 to move forward with option number 4 at 50% of the recommended budget. If I can get a seconder, I'd like to talk about it.
So the motion is, just for clarity, so that we don't go back and forth.
Item 4 at 50%, so $7,600.
Is that clear, Madam Clerk?
It is to me.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Mr. Boileau?
Sorry, there was a change that was made to the recommendation. It actually resulted in the removal of item 6 in the report. So that 6 doesn't exist.
It's in the
We're looking at
recommendation.
number 4.
So if you look at the page 102,
Yes.
there's no item 6. It was removed because there was some confusion on what that item would be.
So what's the motion, Councillor Bergeron?
Item 4.
Item 4.
Yeah, my point is that it cannot include number 6.
Does not.
Okay. So the item is number 4 at half the amount of 15,200, half of that, right? Where's your amount? Number 4 and the amount is?
15,200 divided by 2.
Okay. Seconder was Councillor Towndale. Debate.
So my first question is, we received a report that had an item number 6 and it was signed off, and there was no item 6. Why are we only learning this at a council meeting? We received this on Thursday.
Madam CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we had an item 6. It was a small expenditure item. We thought that it might not practically work in that area. It was the illumination of like a Christmas design. You can see it sometimes shown on buildings. We decided to remove it. If we thought afterwards that it might be able to something that we could do, we can, at a low enough cost, we could bring it forward. So we decided at the last minute to remove that item from the report. And it did not get, unfortunately, it didn't get removed from the recommendation where it said 6. We did not include item 4 in the proposal, in the recommendation for council based on cost for the, per request from council.
So, thank you for the answer. I still have a bit of an issue that 2 senior administrators signed off on this report with item 6 in it to council. Even though you decided to remove it, it was not removed, and it was part of the recommendation.
There's the
Now, the motion is
It's not.
counter to this recommendation, so it's
It's in the recommendation.
sort of irrelevant. So I will speak to the motion that I've made.
Go ahead with the motion.
Thank you. And, you know, I've read a lot of comments about this in the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of people in favor of this, a lot of people who believe that the image of the city is kind of at stake here, and the rotary traffic circle maybe isn't what it used to be. You know, traffic comes in a little bit differently than it did when the bridge, and I appreciate all of that. And that's why the motion is to, you know what, let's put it at half. When I look at these recommendations, though, it's clear as day to me. We have evergreen trees there. There are Christmas trees in the traffic circle. So I think we decorate them. I think we look at this as a budget item for next year. We decide how much more we want to put in if we do. But the idea of moose, snowmen, it's just, I don't understand, frankly, how this was the recommendation when we do have the evergreen trees already there. So I'll just leave it at that. I support this. I ask for support from council. Thank you.
Councillor Towndale and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To be brief, I agree with Councillor Bergeron. We have evergreens in the Rotary Traffic Circle. In the past, I believe, they were illuminated. The option 4, which was not part of the recommendation, is to return to that to some extent. The rest of it, interesting ideas, but maybe a bit too much. The Rotary Traffic Circle used to be the gateway into the city from, if you're coming in from the U.S. or Akwesasne. Obviously, with the bridge being moved, it isn't the case. However, it's still a significant landmark in the city of Cornwall that, you know, Brookdale Avenue, 20,000 cars a day go down there, maybe more now. There's a lot of people who see it. People still see it on their way to the United States or their way through. But to have, I think the goal here is to illuminate it to, you know, obviously, as Councillor Bergeron said, Christmas trees, I said evergreens, but that's kind of the image. It's the image of Christmas. I think that's what works best in this case. And I think it's a reasonable expense. We can reevaluate next year if we want to go further, but at least we can get this started. And then, you know, we do have other reports coming forward with other options in Lambert Park to see what's feasible there as well. And I think it is part of the image of Christmas. It's part of the city. It's one of the things that people do enjoy. It gives a good visual of the city. You know, I find that we've hit a point now where it's unfortunately not where it used to be, and we can bring it back. I know that some more lights went up after our last council meeting. My understanding is some lights were found in storage and they were put up, and that's great. I think it's a great initiative that was undertaken. But let's do some more. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett and then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. I'm not so sure who would answer it, but do we not have $150,000 of lights we used to have in Lambert Park sitting in storage somewhere that we could be using?
Madam CAO, that should be directed to who?
Mr. Ballo, or?
I don't have the answer. I don't know if Scott's.
Mr. Porter.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the lights that were for the Canada 150th
Yes.
had to be removed out of they were up there about a year and a half longer than they were supposed to, and probably 80% of them were burnt out.
Okay.
So what was remaining got put to the Civic Complex and the trees around there. And even in that time, since we've done that, half of them have even burned
Wow.
out. So we don't have those lights anymore.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
I have no trouble supporting this motion. In fact, I was ready to go with the 15, but I think it's, without the bridge, it's even more of a showcase. Just as many people come off the other bridge and go up Brookdale Avenue. To Mark, when previous council, they eliminated cost of putting up some of the lights as a budget
I believe
item.
it was a reduction.
How much, do you remember how much we reduced it by?
Whether Mr. Porter may remember.
I thought it was 15.
It was around 30, it was a traffic circle budget, so it was cut by 50%. So I think it was around $3,500, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So if we add the 7,400 or whatever it is to this, how many more lights do you think we're going to have? It's going to be twice as many we have now, or?
Is that Mr. Porter again?
Scott?
Sorry, your question exactly for?
If we go spend 7,400 or so for more lights, how much more would that eliminate?
Triple what we have there.
Triple? That's pretty good.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
that's pretty good.
Sounds good. Life expectancy of these lights, this becomes a annual budget item, I guess? You were
Mr.
talking
Porter?
burned out lights in a year and a half?
The lights we've got are the LED.
Yeah.
We do take care of when we take them down every year. It's what's on the manufacturer's box, unfortunately. Sometimes they last longer, sometimes they don't, so.
Okay. But, I prefer this to the moose and the deer and all the other things, artificial trees.
Councillor Hollingsworth and then Councillor McDonald.
Can I get the motion read back, please?
Yes, you can.
To install lights on the evergreen trees around the circle, 400 boxes of lights times 30 per box equals $12,000. Bucket truck for 2 day for install and removal, 3,200 for a total of 15,200. Cut that in half for the amount of $7,600.
So, if I'm getting this right, the total amount of cost to the corporation under item 4 is about $7,200, 7,600. Your worship, at the risk of, we really need to be the old Ebenezer Scrooge on this one. I mean, $7,600. Just out of curiosity to admin, perhaps to you, Mr. Boileau, $7,600. Where are we going to get the money from? A reserve, I'm assuming, of some sort.
Fixtures budget.
Mr. Boileau
Did I see it in the report and missed it, or?
or Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Madam Mayor, what we'll do is we will take a look at the corporation overall at the end of the year, and if there's a deficit overall, it will come from reserves. But if there's a surplus, it'll become part of the corporation's cost.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you, Your Worship.
Every story needs a Mr. Scrooge, you know.
I just don't want to be him.
Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I support this motion. I think lights at Christmas time are always good for people. But I don't want to see us apply this to next year. I think what we have to do is take a step back, bring back the proposal that the Heart of the City brought and explained to us probably about a year ago, and Todd Lee, who spoke to us. I hope it was here, as not just at CPEG. No, we did it, yeah, it was here, where we talked about now that the big entrance to the city is at the intersection of Brookdale and Water Street, that we do something there. And there is a wonderfully large patch, a triangular patch of land there, that we could have a prominent welcome to Cornwall that anybody coming in would see. And we could even put it on a pole and have a revolving sign like they have at Citadel. It would be beyond the reach of most vandals, and it would be, I think it would have tremendous potential for making an emphatic, you've arrived in Cornwall. And there could be directions involved with it, but not necessarily, but it would be a statement that you're in Cornwall. Because on the traffic circle, the Cornwall sign is so dim, you don't even see it unless you're looking in daytime, you know, like there's no spotlight on it. I think maybe there should be. Maybe there was at one time, because after all, that was the entrance to the city, but it's no longer. So I think we should move at the times. Let's just do this for this year. 7,000, fine. But let's go back to the drawing board and do something maybe more comprehensive.
Point of clarification, Madam Mayor. Is Councillor McDonald referring to putting lights at the bridge? Because I thought we were talking about the traffic circle and the lights.
We are, and I support 7,000 there, but I don't support us doing it again next year necessarily. Like, let's do this as a one-off this year and have a broader discussion about whether we want to do more on this line or go actually to the foot of the current bridge where one enters the city of Cornwall.
Okay.
So for this year only, and for next year, let's stop and step back and go back to the drawing board.
Thank you. Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to know, I support the motion of spending the money. I just wanted to know a time frame. Are they going to, I know we talked at the last council meeting, leaving them up till the end of January, but I would hope that we're not going to be seen as putting the Christmas lights up after Christmas. And if so, then I would say we just do it for next year.
Madam CIO?
I think you can redirect to Mr. Porter, but I believe the intention is if we get approval from council this evening, we would proceed tomorrow to try to purchase the lights. I think that we can get a bucket in to have them installed, so it's a matter of whether or not we can acquire the lights promptly tomorrow.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams.
Mr. Porter, do you have any comment?
Just one comment on that, one of the problems with the bucket truck right now with the weather is getting the truck into the traffic circle to get the lights put on the trees. Because the ground's so soft, we wouldn't be able to get a bucket in there, and you do need that to get the lights on, so it's all depending on Mother Nature. We can get the lights if they're available too. A lot of the stores right now are running low on supplies, so it might be very close to Christmas. It's not supposed to be cold for another couple of weeks, and the ground needs to freeze, so that was one problem with the bucket truck getting in there, so.
Anybody watching this meeting may be heading out to Canadian Tire as we speak. Councillor Chappelle, is that satisfied?
Yes, I was just hoping that the lights are going to be up prior to Christmas and that's not seen as spending money on Christmas lights to put them up after Christmas.
Okay. Any further comment? Does Councillor Bergeron want to wrap up?
Nope.
All in favor of this motion? Against? Carried. Next item.
Moving on to communication reports. First one is 2019 carry forwards for capital. Recommended that council approve the carry forward of the capital projects listed on Schedule 1 of this report from Financial Services.
Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Any discussion, questions? Yes, Councillor Hollingsworth and then Bergeron.
Just one quick question on the carry forward component. Technically speaking, and I suspect this one's probably going to Ms. Bailey. Technically speaking, does this mean, are these items, like the money isn't spent and in many cases won't be spent, are they subject, and perhaps, I don't know who I'm directing it to, are they subject to debate when we start doing budgets, or are we saying, no, sorry, they're I would prefer they're not, because I have a couple of projects I want to see come to fruition. But my point is this, so the one in particular, the extension of Nick Caneb Drive all the way up past towards Tollgate, if I can get the parameters, but, so is that potentially going to come back to budget deliberation, or G Council, you approved it, we're pushing forward with it? Like, is it gonna be on our budget books if we were to discuss it, or how does it work?
Madam CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So if the money's been set aside for a specific capital project, that money is there. What may come back at budget is a project where we're setting aside funds over multiple years and you need to have like a multiple year contribution to that project. But if we have money set aside already for projects that have been established, that will not come back to council.
Interesting. Now, here's another sort of, I gotta go there, I'm sorry, I gotta ask. If a council sat down at budget and said, yeah, I know we wanted to do Nick Caneb, but you guys haven't really spent any money yet because we haven't been able to move forward with it, and I would like to just cut that this year because I don't want to see the municipality spend it and use it for something else. There's technically nothing stopping council from doing that, correct?
Madam CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, I think council can make decisions on money that hasn't been spent. My only comments would be, depending on what we've done, if we have done any work on that project, if we've made any commitments with respect to issuing any tenders or contracts, that's the stuff that we would want to be careful of. But if we've not done any of that, we haven't engaged in any part of that, then.
Right, so just to clarify, to make sure I'm crystal clear on this, if a tender was like approved, but for whatever reason the project didn't move forward, but there is a tender, there is technically a contractual agreement made or created, we would be really getting ourselves into some serious legal potential problems. If we said, yeah, we know we signed a contract with you, but we think we'd like to save the money now, and we've changed our mind. So there is a kind of a legalese or sort of overarching principle we'd have to adhere to, correct?
You've entered into a contract that you should be honoring.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth kind of started the discussion I wanted to have, but my first question, I suppose, is there's some criteria that meets, what can be carried forward. And item D is projects not yet started, but where council has approved to carry forward to the future year. It's kind of a catch-22. We're approving that, but I don't know which projects don't fall in those first three criteria. All projects have been listed as far as I know. There are no projects that are being withheld, is that correct?
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Our process is to meet with each city department and go over our capital projects that are open. And from there, we close many of our projects. And the list in front of council at the end of each year is the capital projects we'd like to carry forward. Many of the projects are started, and there is a requirement to continue those projects in order to finish them. But there are some projects that are not started, and they do fit under that criteria D. And when we spoke with the department, they said, would like to have this on the list. It's been approved by council. They've given us reasons why the capital project should be going forward and up for approval through council. So there are a few projects on the list where you see no dollars spent to date. And if you have any specific questions on any of those projects, I would redirect to the department manager.
I do. So I'd like to go through them if I can. So and we'll just use this one as an example because it's a big line item. $1 million was set aside for the bike path retaining wall structure. This was given to us at budget in February. It's been 10 months and now we're still in the design stage. Can you talk about design stage in general and what that means? Because there's quite a few projects that fall in that, I suppose, description.
Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'll redirect that question. That was a project of Recreation Services, but I believe is now a project of Municipal Works and Engineering. So if Michael Fothrop could comment on the
Mr.
designs.
Yep. Mr. Foth?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. So the project has been transferred over to our department. We're working through the design stage, and we expect it to be able to tender 12 services.
Can you clarify what design stage means? Because there's $0. So does that mean we are working on it internally? We know it's going to be awarded, but it's not yet at RFP. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So our staff internally are producing the design. So our engineering department is working on the design and tender documents, and the tender will be out in the coming year.
Thank you. So this is a perfect example of a project that I feel would not meet the requirements of A, B, or C, but does meet the requirements of D, which says all of everything else. Item C is project not yet started, but where tenders, RFPs, or quotations have been issued. No RFP has been issued for that project, correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no RFP has been issued. Our own staff will be doing the design work, and the tender will be coming out shortly.
Thank you. And the construction project does not have a holdback?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not at this point. It would whenever a contract review.
And again, item A, the project is in the process and will not be completed prior to the end of the current year. Would you describe it that way?
It would not be completed by the end of 2019. It would be completed by the end of 2020.
Thank you. So this is just the first example, and I have about 12 of them. These don't meet the A, B, and C, but item D says projects not yet started, but where council has approved to carry forward. I really would have liked to see the projects that don't meet those criteria as a separate document, because then we can talk about each one individually. And so I have a few more questions about some of these other items that are at $0. And the next example I would ask is the $160,000 for new docks. It's also in the design stage, but this is an item from the budget before I even was a councillor. How can it still be in the design stage? It's a 2-year project. I don't know who does. The docks.
Mr. Boileau?
I believe these are the docks for both Gaydon and at the RCAF wing. I'm not familiar with the details of where they are at this time, but
It's in the design stage, safe to say?
to be honest with you, I don't know where they are, what stage it's at.
Respectfully, that's not a good enough answer for me to approve these as items that we carry forward. And so I really wish that we would have had D projects not yet started, but where council has to approve as a separate conversation. And so I can't approve the motion as it is. There's quite a few other items on this list that I don't have answers for, that in February, we received capital project requests. This is 10 months ago, and these haven't, not yet started, they're not even in the design phase. And so, to me, if it's coming to us at budget time, well, that means it should happen in that year. And I appreciate that there are things that will fall out of that, and we have some pretty good rules for that. But I'm not just gonna carte blanche approve everything that doesn't fall outside, or everything that does fall outside of that. So I won't be approving this. There's just a lot of leeway here that I don't approve. Thank you.
So I'm going to turn to the CAO for comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we do have some areas with some projects within our budgets where projects have not been started, and there have been some extenuating circumstances. So in recreation, as an example, early on after the budget process, it was a decision to bring Marina 200 in-house. So that was a fairly significant undertaking for the department. Around the same time, we had a fairly significant issue with a generator and a bus duct at the Civic Complex that also took multiple weeks to get resolution before that building, I think, was brought back up to where it needed to be. Add on top of that, we had the opportunity to bring in Cirque du Soleil. So that also required quite a bit of attention amongst the recreation staff. So there are quite a few things that have happened in some departments. Another department that is not had enough movement on some of their budget for their building is the Glenstone Lodge. So part of what has happened over the last couple of months is we have done some reorganization to bring buildings and facilities into one area. I think that by doing so, it will allow us to be able to put our resources better aligned to meet some of those needs of those capital projects. And I would also say that in previous years, we have always had situations or circumstances in some departments where we've not been able to get the projects done during the year. But for recreation, as an example, quite often we do work on those capital projects during the winter months when we're not as busy with some of our outdoor programming in the summer and in the fall.
So your points are well taken, Councillor Bergeron, and I think that what would be helpful is to also maybe provide administration with a list ahead of time so that they come prepared to answer specifically to the projects. But your point about the report addressing, giving more detail, I think it's well taken. So I'll leave that with administration to review. But we as council should also be giving administration. I know we get the agenda late, I get it. But a heads up in terms of, I'm going to be asking about these 12 projects. Sometimes you might get, a more prepared answer because administration will have looked up those projects and given you a fuller answer. Just a comment from the bench. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I look at it a different way. I was involved in all the capital projects at Domtar. I was in charge of the crews that did them. There's extenuating circumstances in many of these, as was explained. To me, we agreed initially that this was a good way to spend money to improve the community. It's still there. Nothing's changed on this, and I think it's up to administration to go back and say, it's zero, and these are the reasons for it, but it's zero. And that's not a problem. I don't have a problem with that. But to cut them off, I would say no. But if we have any questions about them, we should individualize them and get specifics so they can answer specifics to administration, because the administration aren't mind readers. We have to give them that input. So I know that we've gone through this many, many years, and there are always questions about it. But we originally, or council, previous council, agreed to these projects. So they were there, they were needed, let's move forward with them. So I'm ready to move forward with all of them, but if there's specific questions that are required, then we should be addressing them.
Good points. Thank you, Councillor Grant. And then again, we have new councillors. So for them, this is a beginning process, right? So that's the point of having a new council, is to review these things and to have councillors make points and respond. So, points well taken. Councillor McIntosh.
Through you, perhaps, Michael, the, maybe I missed it, the retaining wall on Water Street between Adolphus and Gloucester, I believe 2 years ago was put in the budget. Has that ever been done?
Mr. Fothrop.
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, it hasn't.
It's off the, is it off the radar now?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, yeah, we expect it to be able to tender early in spring, work to start early in spring.
Yeah, okay.
Is it on this list?
Councillor Bergeron.
Is that project on this list that we're being asked to approve?
Madam Mayor, yes it is, so
Thank
it
you.
would be,
Understood.
it's the sixth one down from the
Thank you.
All right, I missed it.
Thank you. So all in favor? Against? Carried. Next item, Madam Clerk.
2019 carry forwards for operations. The recommendation is that council approve the carry forwards of 2019 operations to 2020.
Moved by Councillor Gardner and Councillor Hébert. Any discussion? Councillor McIntosh.
There's one for the Benson Center, new flooring, $25,000. New flooring in the Benson Center? How old is Benson Center? I guess it was mine.
Madam CEO.
Mr. Wallow, or
Benson Center, new flooring, automotive room.
Well, the Benson Center, through you, Madam Mayor, the Benson Center is about 10 years old. It's, the automotive room is one of the most, one of the busiest rooms there, and I suspect they must have some deficiencies with it and require some.
Is that, you have been in there a couple times, here, is it? What kind of flooring? The carpet?
I'm actually not sure.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Bergeron.
I'm just curious why this report doesn't look like the last report where we have what was budgeted versus what was approved versus what is spent. It's a little bit more difficult to understand the change, I suppose, or why it's being carried forward.
Madam CFO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just like the capital carry forward report, we have some operating projects that we think that we're gonna complete within the one-year budget, within the calendar year. But because of certain circumstances, they were not complete. The department manager has asked us to carry them forward because they're important to complete, and we're asking to do that. So those funds will be contributed to reserves at the end of the year and taken from reserves at the beginning of the year in order for the projects to proceed in the new year.
Sorry, but these were
Yes.
approved as operational expenses in February.
That's correct.
Any other comments, questions? All in favor? Against? Carried.
Transfer payments for city partners, with a recommendation that council authorize administration to continue monthly transfer payments for operating costs to identified city partners as listed in this report.
Moved by Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Dupel. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Just one quick question, Your Worship, with regards to Eastern Ontario and Health Unit and Raisin River Conservation Authority. Are we legally obliged to provide money for that?
Madam CEO.
through you, Madam Mayor, yes, there is a municipal funding component. There are sections within their budgets that perhaps if council wanted, and we had sometimes talked about whether or not we should be inviting the health unit and the conservation authority to come in and make a presentation to council to let you know what the programs are, what the funding will do for those organizations. But as far as municipal contributions, there is a mandatory requirement for some municipal funding. But there could be some components within their budgets that, you know, might have, that could have a component where council might have some input on if they wanted to.
Well, here's, perhaps I'll ask this question, Your Worship, which might, do we have any discretion in terms of the amount that we give? I mean, technically speaking, Cornwall Public Library, this municipality could choose to, I'm not saying I am, don't get excited everyone, I'm gonna say, is that technically speaking, we could cut almost all the funding to the public library, correct? If we chose to.
So through you, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Madam CEO.
We are required to have a municipal public library.
Right.
But you could have, you could make decisions affecting those, but to impact the library's budget. I would caution you though on the health unit and the conservation authority. So, and I'm probably more familiar with the conservation authority. There could be some smaller programs within that budget that might be, whether it's discretionary or whether council could have some input or influence on how much is spent on some of those projects.
Just so we're crystal clear, your worship, so people don't start panicking. I'm
No
not
one's panicking.
suggesting
No
we
one's
cut-
panicking.
I heard my colleague kind of wincing back here behind me, but anyway, the point is, simply put, what I would like, if it's possible, and I don't need, but in terms of budget, it would be worthwhile for myself, and perhaps my colleagues would appreciate it or not, in terms of how much discretion we have, if any, for any of these kind of organizations, simply because, not like where I'm suggesting we go out and, but I have no idea what leeway I would have to do in terms of policy. It would be nice to know. That's all I'm saying.
Madam CEO.
So through you, Madam Mayor, we could certainly have, like, you know, and the library does, we can certainly have these organizations come in, present their budgets, provide you with that information. What this report is doing is it's just asking us to continue to fund them 1/12, like give them their monthly
Yeah, I
payments,
understand.
right? So even if we brought them in during the budget process, if there was some adjustments to their budget, that's fine. It can still be worked out within the parameters of the funding that we're
Right.
providing to them.
I guess, your worship, thank you for your patience. Simply, when I look at, as an example, the $649,000 for the health unit, is that something we have to do? That's it? End of discussion? Or is there anything in terms of that money that is debatable at a potential budget meeting? That's all I'm looking for.
Yep.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so these are the 2019 budgets, so we haven't
Right.
received, well, we have received their 2020 budgets, but we would want to bring them, I think we would want to bring them in. I would suggest that a fairly significant component of that funding does not have a lot of flexibility to it, to the
Which is
municipality.
what I suspected. Thank you, your worship.
There are 11 people around the table. It's fine. No panic. Councillor Gardner.
You know what, I think I'd best I just sit. Thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Update on Blue Box transition to full producer responsibility. The action recommended is that council receive this report for information.
Councillor Grant moves to accept the report. Councillor Bennett seconds. So, this is a rather involved report, very good information. I'm wondering if, Madam CAO, you would want to have Ms. Watson give us a high-level summary?
We certainly could. Ms. Watson, if you'd like to speak to the report.
So through you, Madam Mayor, this is a significant transition that the province has been planning for some time now. It involves multiple stakeholders.
Do you want to speak into the mic?
Sure.
Yeah.
Viewers at home. Oh, so the transition of the Blue Box program is going to be a large process. It's led by the provincial government. It's been on the table for a long time, and it's complex in the way that there's multiple stakeholders. So you have municipalities who have been the owners of the Blue Box program, in our case since 1992. You have the producers of the materials, and they're very much involved in the production of the different materials that you see in your Blue Box. And then you have some outside producers who some of their materials aren't being recycled. So they're producing materials that currently are not recycled in the Blue Box program and are ending up in our landfill. So there's a lot of stakeholders that in this discussion, and right now what they're looking at is transferring what we currently have, which is a 50% funded producer responsibility program. So each year we receive 50% of our collection costs for Blue Box and 50% of our processing costs for Blue Box. This, what they're looking at now, is transitioning that to full producer responsibility, which would mean the taxpayer would no longer be responsible for funding the additional 50% that we currently do. And through this transition program and what's outlined in this report are all the things that could happen. We're not certain on what's going to happen, and that's why these consultation sessions have begun through the province. So there are 4 objectives in this report that they're looking at, which is the designation of Blue Box materials, so what we have now versus what we could have in the future. The collection and accessibility, so looking at how we will collect those Blue Box materials and how accessible that is to the public. The management and reporting requirements, so how we're going to manage those materials moving forward, how the producers will manage those materials moving forward, and how they'll have to report those requirements. So right now we do report on our Blue Box program. So how will the producers be responsible, and how will they have to report their diversion rates? And then the last is the transition of the program. So how will this program transition from each municipality to the producer? So there's not a lot of information on transition at this point, but they are looking at transitioning in the years 2023 to 2025. So it is a 3-year transition period in which, based on their original information that we have right now, every single municipality in Ontario will transition in some form to this new program for full producer responsibility.
Okay. Questions? Yes, Councillor Hébert and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A comment and a question. I'm a little concerned about what producer responsibility will look like. Just wondering if it's going to look as good as what the current program is. So anyways, that's more to come there. But I know that this is part of the Waste Free Ontario Act, which came about a couple of years ago. And as part of that, I believe there was a deadline for municipalities to either have a plan or have in place organic pickup. And I know this isn't about organic waste, but is that deadline still, does that still exist? Or with the new government, has that been scrapped?
So no, through you, Madam Mayor, although it's a separate topic from the Blue Box and kind of a separate provincial initiative, the organics program is still in line for 2025.
25, okay.
Should that timeline change because of this large transfer of the Blue Box, I'm not certain on that.
Okay.
They haven't started consultation on the organics program quite yet. They just have developed the framework for that.
Great, that's great. I couldn't remember what the date was, and I've been asked, so good to know. Thank you. Thank you for your report.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks. I'm just looking for a little bit of clarification as far as producers. So is producers, I make the bottle for Coke, so I'm responsible for it, or is Coke, the distributor of the bottle, responsible for the collection? Because if I'm a company that's putting the bottle out and now I'm responsible for putting it away, I might make a little less plastic.
Yeah, so the definition of producer is, again, it's not set in stone. However, producers are supposed to be the first importers or producers of the product. I'm not sure how that would work in the sense of Coke. Coca-Cola is one of the producers that is listed here. I'm not sure if they make their own plastic bottles, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if they have a third party that does that for them.
That's why I was curious if that would have included.
But that's part of that 4-step that I talked about, is a designation and definition of Blue Box materials, and in that I would hope that we would see some sort of definition outlining what a producer or who a producer is.
I just like the way this looks on the surface because, we want to eliminate plastics, and I think if you're making the people responsible for putting them out there in the first place, responsible for collecting them back again, maybe they're going to start looking for alternatives. So, thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Elaine McDonald.
Okay. Well, this was a huge, long report. Thanks a lot for writing it. I wish I could tell you I understand it, but I read it and I was fascinated. And I just wondered, at the end of the day, this might not look all that different to those of us who use a Blue Box. The difference would be in simply who pays. And I think it would be a nightmare trying to calculate how much each producer would pay instead of the taxpayer paying. But it could really be just that simple, couldn't it? Like they're simply going to send the bill elsewhere.
That's correct. So I believe I mean, we don't have a whole lot of information right now because we're just in the consultation process.
Yeah.
From my understanding, it would be, the province has mandated that the Blue Box program will not change for residential users.
Right.
So residents would not see a difference in their current method of collection or what goes in the Blue Box necessarily. On the back end, there would be a lot of work that would be required for the municipality and the producers to work out. But yes, the front line, the residents would not see,
Yeah.
not see that.
And it'd be so hard to determine what portion of what's in the blue box belongs to each producer on a municipality, you know, that scope. Anyway, somebody else's problem.
Any other comments? I just want to follow up on Councillor Bennett's comment about trying to explain this to the public as well, because we all need to start talking about the same thing and making sure that people understand what's what. But at the end of the day, it's who's responsible. And my worry is always, is it the city? Is it always the municipality that picks up the bill? Or are we going to share this with producers? And so I guess that remains to be seen in terms of how far that's going to go. One thing jumped out at me in your report. Most recently, the City of Cornwall has been asked to be one of 28 other municipalities in the Municipal Stakeholder Working Group. That's cool. Can you talk about that?
Yes, certainly. So recently, the City of Cornwall has been approached and been asked to be a part of the Municipal Working Group for this transition process. We're one of 28 other municipalities. We do, along with the City of Ottawa, we are representing Eastern Ontario. Which is great. It is good to represent Eastern Ontario because we're a little bit different than Southwestern Ontario and Toronto, which are also a big part of that 28 municipalities. So we do take, as most of the councillors are aware, we do take from other municipalities around us. So strategically, we do have a good strategic MRF, and it's good to be involved in this process because we can let them know what our thoughts are about the transition of the Blue Box program.
Kudos to the city and to city staff for that distinction. It is always good for us to be representing. Thank you. Any more comments? All in favor? Against? Carried. Thank you, Ms. Watson.
Falcon Homes, part of lot control. Recommendation is that council approve the following. A, that part lot control be removed from lots 6, 8, 9, and 10 on registered plan 52M43 in the City of Cornwall. And B, that part lot control be reinstated on the semi-detached lots in the Belford Estate subdivision once the subject lots have been created by the appropriate procedure.
Moved by Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Dupel. Questions, comments? Councillor Bourgeois.
I don't recall this being at the Planning and Advisory Committee. Am I just forgetting?
Madam CAO?
Which is entirely possible.
Accepted.
Mr.
Mr. Boileau?
Actually, this is one of the benefits of part law control is that it comes directly to council.
It always comes directly to council?
Correct.
Is there a reason why Planning and Advisory would not first see this and then council? I just find this is very PAC kind of related material.
It's a process that instead of going to the Committee of Government, it's reviewed by staff and directly reports to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Against? Carried.
So, Madam Mayor, there are no new tenders or RFPs, and neither do we have any new business motions.
Merci.
So passing of bylaws, that bylaws 2019-150 to 164, or now 165, pardon me, with the addition of the bylaw listed on the agenda, are being presented to council for adoption.
Moved by, Councillor Bergeron, question?
Can we take out item 165 as a separate discussion?
We can, yes.
Madam Clerk.
So the motion would be for bylaws 150 to 164.
Moved by Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? All in favor? Against? Carried.
Would you like me to read the heading of bylaw 165?
Yes, I would.
It is a bylaw to authorize the purchase of land at 735 Tollgate Road from estate of Hugh Gravely.
Moved by Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Glenn Grant. Comments, questions? Councillor Bergeron.
So I asked this to come out because we're approving a pretty substantial purchase of land, I think, for a new fire hall. And I just want to be really clear with the public, because this is the first time this will be coming to the public. Personally, I'm opposed to this. I don't support it. I didn't support it all year. I stand by that. At budget time, I tried to pass a motion where we didn't move forward on a fire hall until the business plan was made public. The business plan is not yet public. We've seen it in camera. It's not yet public. So to me, this process is flawed. I want to see that business plan as a public conversation before I approve any purchase of land as per the business plan. And so, you know, personally, I'm opposed to location. I think I know I can't say too much about what we discussed in camera today, but I'm just steadfastly opposed to this, and I hope that is recorded. I'd like a recorded vote.
Madam Clerk, is there any further discussion? Madam Clerk?
Councillors Claude McIntosh,
Yes.
Elaine McDonald,
Yes.
Sid Gardner,
Yes.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Present, yes, and I am present.
Caroline Hébert, Councillors Modeste Dupel,
Yes.
Glenn Grant,
Yes.
Todd Bennett,
Yes.
Justin Towndale,
Yes.
Éric Bergeron,
Opposed.
and Madam Mayor.
Oui.
In favor but one.
Thank you, carried. Next item.
Reports from standing committee, Madam Mayor.
Any reports from standing committees? Councillor Gardner.
It's not really a standing committee, just to let you know that there's a letter, the next step for the university is in your mailboxes. You understand that where we're going, and pretty soon we'll have a committee and we'll have some public hearings as soon as we get the information back from people who are supporting the university.
Right, so we've drafted a letter to go out to request letters of support and to gauge public support. And so that those letters are going out shortly. Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Grant, was it Councillor Bergeron? Councillor Grant, did you have your hand up? No? Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you. Just an update from the Airport Commission. Last week, we passed a motion to we approved an RFP to rewrite a business plan and strategic plan. We'll be getting that in March and hopefully present it to this council by the beginning of April. I know that's after budget, but it should have good enough information for us to have a really good conversation about the future of our airport. It was not a budget item. This was approved through funds in the budget.
Thank you. Anybody else? Reports? Councillor Elaine? No? Okay. Next item.
Next item is our unfinished business listing, and the recommendation is that council receive this business listing.
Moved by Councillor Bennett, seconded by Councillor Grant. All in favor? Carried.
Confirming bylaw, that bylaw 166 is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the City of Cornwall at its meeting held tonight, December 9th.
Moved by Councillor Bennett, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All in favor? Carried. So I'd like to, before we adjourn, just start by thanking city employees and city managers. Everywhere you look in this very, very competent, very, very beautiful city, you see the work of a city employee. You see the dedication of city workers. And in this room, you have the managers that oversee those very important people to the lives of the 47,000 plus people who live in this city. So I thank you all for your work. I thank you for sitting in these chambers month after month, working out the best way to deal with this city and to move it forward. So merci beaucoup. To the people around this council table, thank you. We are a year in, so we're no longer a baby council. We are finding our feet, and I want to thank all of you for being as engaged as you are. I've been around for a decade plus, and I have not seen a council so engaged ever, and so engaged in such a respectful way. And always, always, because all of you, I have no doubt about this, care deeply about where you live. Alors je vous remercie pour votre travail et votre dévouement. So, all that is said because it's Christmas, and I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, un joyeux Noël, et merci, merci beaucoup. Thanks to the media too. You show up also, and we appreciate that we are a city. Yeah, well, it's not always, we're not always thrilled, but the fact is that you push the message out, and we are still very fortunate to have as much media as we have in this city. And so we appreciate that. So thank you, Joyeux Noël, Merry Christmas. Be safe. Safe travel to everyone. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Hébert, all in favor? Carried.
Are we giving these doubles to again?